long time, I was scared to share my true color, to be who I truly was. I was hiding in the story I was reading, fearful of what people would think about me. But this ends now. I have stopped running. I decide to accept my diversity. Today, I will share our story of neurodiversity and mental health awareness. Welcome on the ADHD Melly Show. Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing well. I'm back from a little vacation. I know that you maybe missed me from last week because I wasn't live. And yeah, I'm back. Yay! So I hope you're doing well today because we're going to talk about an important subject is inclusivity in the workplace. You know how important this is for me, not only on an employee side, but if we have more people that hire inclusively, it's going to be easier for neurodivergent, not only neurodivergent, but anyone that needs some help with jobs and they have difficulty because the way they are, if they have an handicap or not. And this is why we're going to talk about that today, because it's very important. It's a little bit about what we're going to talk about in my event September 12th as well. Like you can see on the link below, you can buy your ticket right now. And don't forget, the 29th of August is going to go up. The price is going to get higher because we want this to be rushed. So if you want to keep the low price, go buy your ticket now because it's going to go up very soon. So let's introduce our guest, Manoj Jonna.
Hi, Melly.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I love the intro to your show. It was very nicely done.
Thank you.
Congrats on launching this, and it looks like you have an exciting event coming up September 12th. I will certainly try to make it. I need to get tickets myself, and we'll definitely encourage everyone to doing it. A lot of the world, I feel, would benefit from just learning and being better, and and getting past some of the misinformation that's out there, or just lack of general knowledge. So I really appreciate all the work that you've been doing. I know it's not hard, it's not easy, and you've been doing a tremendous job so far.
Thanks so much. To introduce a little bit yourself, I know that you're a business owner yourself, so talk to me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, we are an early stage startup. I'm one of the co-founders of Ramped. We are in the career space and in the education space. The only reason we exist is because we know how difficult it is for people to find a job, and how difficult it is for folks that may be neurodiverse or may have some trouble finding a job as is. Our goal is to provide a learning and skilling platform so folks can come in and at no cost learn job skills, get some interview prep, and connect with amazing employers, kind employers, and folks that don't discriminate, and find jobs. Because at the end of the day, we all want to make a living, and we want to make an honest living, and we want to do it as easily as possible. So that's why we exist.
So why have you decided to go in this field? What clicked you that you needed to go forward that goal in your life?
Yeah, because Melly, I remember how difficult it was for me to find a job. Man, it was such a tough process. I applied to so many jobs and I just get rejected left, right, and center. I'd show up to interviews and I'm afraid about saying the wrong thing, or saying something that won't help me get a job. And I was nervous the entire time. And it took me a really long time to get over it. Years and years of doing it, trying and failing and trying and failing. And as I got older and started to move to a position where I was interviewing people, I saw a lot of my struggles in people that I interviewed, and I'm like, man, I was you not too long ago, and so started the business because I felt the pain myself, and wanted to play along with two other co-founders of mine, play a small part in making it a little bit easier for job seekers to gain a little bit of confidence and learn job skills and find jobs. And so the business was formed out of pain points that we had felt ourselves, and wanted to make life just a little bit easier for other people, because again, job search is stressful. It just is, and it doesn't have to be.
Absolutely. I know that I struggle so hard to find a job myself, and I decided to go back to college. And after that, I felt some stress and difficulty to just finish the school as well, because it's made for neurotypical. Everything is done like this, and it's not a little way where you can make it easier or finding some accommodation to just succeed. So for you, what is an inclusive workplace? What will you thought? You see this job now. How do you know this is inclusive or not?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think stepping back, we all should do better in determining what inclusivity means, right? And so, from where we sit, and I strongly believe this is how everyone should look at the world. Inclusivity doesn't mean creating a space for folks that look like you or have the same experiences that you've had, right? That's not inclusivity. Inclusivity is providing a space where folks are given the opportunity to be their best selves. That's it, right? Period. Everyone comes in with their own unique set of skills, their own unique set of experiences, things that they are naturally good at, things that they enjoy doing, things that they don't enjoy doing. And the best thing that any employer can do, the best thing that any hiring manager can do, any employer can do is how do we create a space so that people can be their best self, right? That's inclusivity. If that means, we've gotten slightly better over time, right? Historically, folks that had a physical disability would have a really hard time getting into buildings,
Mm-hmm.
right? We didn't have ramps until ADA came in and started taking a lot of this seriously, right? And so physical disabilities, visible disabilities, the idea was, okay, hey, let's build a ramp so that someone can physically enter into a building. Yeah, sure, it's inclusive. It's just as inclusive as having stairs for folks that have both their legs, right? And so what's the difference between a ramp or a set of stairs? At the end of the day, all that they do is provide access so folks can come in and enter into a building. Um, and we need to get better, right? We've gotten past physical disabilities. Now let's look at like all of the invisible disabilities, and let's not think of these as accommodations or extra special things that you're doing, but things that you would reasonably do for your own self, right? So that's how we should look at inclusivity. Like, how do we create a space, whether it's physical, whether it's digital, so that folks can come in and be their best self, and don't view accommodations as something that as an extra step that you're taking or something nice that you're doing or pat yourself on the back. It's what you should do. It's the reasonable thing to do. It's the right thing to do.
Exactly. And people will often say money, 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 money wise. You have to pay more for accommodation for this. It's the same thing like I said for a ramp. You need to pay more to do a ramp, but at the same time, your business is going to be more viewed and people are going to be happy to go to your business and just enjoy the same services that anyone else. It's the same thing for job. You can work to do anything else. Even if I need an accommodation, like give you an example, to be in a silent space, or without distraction, because my ADHD is going to go everywhere if I have people running around me all day long. It's going to put us more productive, and it's not going to cost you 1 cent, or really, it's not going to cost you that much. And what you're going to get in return is going to be higher in your investment, and sometimes people are scared about that. So what will you say to an employer that wants to offer accommodation but they are scared about the cost it's going to cost?
Yeah, I mean, there's two ways of looking at it, right? One is the economic argument, right,
Mm-hmm.
where one could say, okay, this accommodation is going to cost you something.
Mm-hmm.
Let's run a cost benefit analysis. It's going to cost you X, but folks that are neurodiverse will come in and they perform better than everybody else. You may have customers that are neurodiverse. They'll view your company favorably, more sales. And so positive ROI, great. You should do it. That's one argument. Another argument that you could make, which I challenge employers to actually think about, is should this even be an economic argument? Like, not everything has to be a cost benefit economic argument, right? There's many things that we do as employers and we do as individuals, and we just do it because it's the right thing to do. There's not much of a cost benefit argument that's happening, and so you don't necessarily have to reduce topics that are centered around the human experience to cost benefit. Yes, there's an argument that could be made there, and sure, I'd encourage employers to look at it that way. But sometimes maybe you shouldn't look at it through that lens, right? If you have access
Mhm.
to resources and it's not going to sink your business, do it. What are you going to lose? What are you going to lose from being a kind, responsible employer? Not very much. And the other thing is, I also think folks vastly overestimate how expensive these things are. A lot of the accommodation requests are not even a function of an expense. Many of these accommodation requests that I have seen folks ask that have been turned down over and over again, things as simple as, may I turn off my camera for 10 minutes during a 1 hour Zoom meeting because I'm overstimulated, has nothing to do with cost, right? Let them do it. It's not a big deal. May I choose to, can I not attend this social event, or could I adjust my work hours? Also, is not a cost event. I can tell you the number of folks that are disengaged, not productive, folks that are not neurodiverse, come in, collect a paycheck, do very little. Employers turn a blind eye towards it. They don't care. But all of a sudden, if you have someone that affirmatively says, hey, can I work these hours because this is when I'm most productive, or I skipped this meeting because of this for legitimate reason, all of a sudden employers open up their calculators and they go, oh, wow, you're missing an hour. That's going to, no, it doesn't, right? And so that's my perspective, right? It's three things. One is things may not cost as much as you think they do. So start there. And second, if they do cost a little bit of money, consider not doing an ROI analysis because it may not be relevant, it may not be meaningful, it may not be necessary. And third, if you need to do it, sure, give it a go. And you'll often realize that it's completely worth the little investment that you have to make, especially if you're an employee that has access to resources. Any company that's publicly traded or that's a large, this should be a no-brainer. Like this,
Mhm.
you built the business on the backs of all kinds of folks. So it's about time that they give back.
Exactly. And what will you say to the employee that comes to you searching for a job and they say, I cannot do this? I'm giving an example. I rather work part-time, because this is another problem. Part-time jobs are like impossible to find. And what will you say to employees, the employer, I mean, that don't want to hire that person that's very talented and that will give a lot to the business, but he only can work part time for any reason? It can be overstimulation, or only their brain just cannot do it that much long, because not everybody can stay on the computer for 8 hours a day. It's very hard for the brain and simply not necessarily possible. And why are they not hiring two employees? It's the same thing, right? And
Yep.
sometimes they just don't want to do that. So what will you suggest to the employers that really don't want to hire part-time while they could do it because there's two employees that wants to do part-time, and if you do the work for everybody, it's going to be fine.
Yep. No, it makes a lot of sense. Now, there's a couple of different ways of looking at it. There are certain jobs where physical presence and the number of hours that you work has a direct correlation with sales or service or whatnot. For example, if you work in retail
Mm-hmm.
and you were a cashier at a convenience store, you being present in front of a cash register for 8 hours means that you're able to service customers for 8 hours.
Mm-hmm.
If you're at a cash register for 4 hours, it means there's another 4 hours where the business needs to find another cashier. So for those types of jobs, you may want to think about your staffing model, right? And so if someone can only work 4 hours, then sure, you may have to hire somebody else for the other 4 hours. And that discussion is pretty cut and dry. It's black and white, right? I can
Mm-hmm.
work 4 hours. I can work 4 hours. I'm going to staff my business so that it makes sense. Then there's all these other jobs where the output does not really have a direct correlation with number of hours that you work during the day. For these types of jobs, you could just simply focus on the output.
Mm-hmm.
These are the tasks that I need completed. Do you as an employer really need to care how these tasks get done and when they get done? How much flexibility do you have in terms of timelines and length of the project? For example, there may be a task that you may very well just get done in 20 hours. You may not need 40 hours. You may have a productive 20 hours and get it done. You may have an employee that's technically full time, that's on the books for 40 hours, that might just sit around for the other 20 and get it done in 20. And so for all these other jobs that don't have a direct correlation between hours spent on the job and output, or the correlation is a little bit loose, I think there's an opportunity to be flexible by changing the narrative from full-time jobs and part-time jobs to tasks. What are these tasks that you expect to get done? And what is the timeline in which you want these tasks to get done? And then negotiate between an employee, a contractor, a full-time. How does it matter? As long as it gets done, it gets done. And so that's the perspective that I would take. And it's hard, right? Because if an employer posts a job and they say, oh, full-time only, and you're only willing to work, or able to work for 30 hours or 40 hours, you're looking for a job, you don't have a lot of leverage. I can see where the stress comes from, because if you go to an employer and the first thing you say is, okay, I see you posted a job for full-time, I can only work part-time, the conversation may likely die right there, right? An employer might say, no, I don't want to talk to you. And so my practical recommendation is, if you are a job seeker and you feel you've understood the job description, you see what they want you to do, you believe that you can get that done in a shorter period of time, I think an employer might be willing to have a conversation. I mean, you're essentially asking them to pay you less for doing a job faster. And so that's one thing. Listen, for these other jobs that are retail, that has to be a negotiation. That's a little bit trickier, because if you can only work 4 hours, then the employer has to find somebody else, and it's up to them whether they want to go through that conversation or not. But my suggestion is we're focusing on hours, maybe reframing the discussion around tasks and your unique ability to get these tasks done in a certain period of time might get you a little bit farther with an employer. And I'd also encourage employers to kind of think about their jobs as tasks that need to get accomplished, as opposed to how many hours do you sit on a chair and warm it, right? What's the point? I get no joy from asking anyone at RAM to sit in front of a computer for 40 hours a day. It does nothing. How does it matter, right? Our customers don't value us because our employees are sitting in their chairs for 40 hours away. Nobody cares. They just care about things getting done.
Yeah, and that's a problem. We should stop paying people per hour, but per task instead, because that's another problem. Because I've seen a lot of people, I try to work in like office and stuff like that, and most of the time you do nothing because you're like nothing else to do for the day, and that's a problem. And there's always a couple of hours you're at an office doing nothing, instead of rather being home.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they offer you that they pay you for doing nothing. So what's the worst part? The employer that pays the employee doing nothing, or the employee that leaves earlier but has the same salary because they did it faster? So it's unfair, So this should be work differently,
It should be. I mean, just look at what tasks do you expect folks to get done? What's the value of those tasks, right? What are your customers willing to pay for these tasks that are done? And how much of that money that you're going to get from customers are you willing to pay employees? And how much profit do you need to make, right? And so center jobs around tasks and give people as much freedom and flexibility as possible. Now, there might be some tasks that are not individual. These might be group tasks, which requires you to work with teams maybe all over the country, all over the world. And so you may need to show up at a certain day at a certain time, because that's when it works to have a meeting with everybody else. But I've never really seen I haven't seen a lot of job seekers that want to be so inflexible. I think they're asking for a little bit of flexibility, not as much. And there's no reason to have like a knee-jerk reaction. And so the best jobs that I've had are the ones where I've had as much flexibility as possible to control how I work, when I work, and where I work, right? If you simply leave me be, personally, I do better than being asked to show up at a certain time and do work in a certain way. Listen, if I try my methods and if it doesn't work, then that's fine. It's fair game, open for discussion. You can tell me that I suck. That's okay. But as long as I'm working and producing results, like, it shouldn't matter how I get it done.
Exactly. It's not only about inclusivity. Every employee, neurodivergent or not, should have the same workplace and the same flexibility, because yeah, it could feel unfair if you see the employer with ADHD or neurodiversity getting a certain treatment. I can understand that. But maybe the ADHD treatment is good for everybody, you know? Everybody needs to be flexible. Everybody needs some time to not work because they have, I don't know, appointment or children that needs to be getting at school because they're sick, you know, and etc. etc. So how does it work in your office with your employee? How does they work?
I mean, listen, we have not monitored when folks show up to work and when they don't. There are meetings that are team meetings and group meetings that we try to organize and make sure everyone's there at the same time. But I can talk to you about my own working style, right? I am not a 9 to 5 worker. That's not how I work. I sprint and then I rest, and then I sprint and then I do a little bit of work and I sprint. That's just how I work. That's how I always work. I do not have the attention span to sit and focus for 2 hours. It's just very hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
I am more of a intense focus for 30 minutes, and then I need to task switch. I need to do something completely different. I may need to hop on the phone and have a conversation with somebody else, right? I'm not best at doing production work for extended periods of time. That's me. There are other folks that simply want to sit and produce, that don't want to get distracted.
Mm-hmm.
There are folks that work better in the mornings. There are folks that work better at nights. And so, barring team meetings, um, where multiple people's schedules have to be coordinated across different time zones, otherwise, when work gets done, is we leave it largely to people that are doing work. There are, again, some roles that are customer facing. We may just have customers that expect you to be around during certain business hours. That's okay. Well, those are roles that may be a little less flexible than other roles, right?
Mm-hmm.
For example, if you're editing videos, you can edit videos at night. It's fine, right? A social media video editing role, that can happen whenever, as long as you have a content calendar and you know when it's going to be get produced. You don't have to do it at a certain day, certain hour. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's the approach that we've taken. And the question that I ask myself and my co-founders ask ourselves is, how is it that we work? What is it that we've liked at employers that we worked in the past, and what is it that we've not liked? I can guarantee you, the ones that have not liked are the ones that are like, oh, you got to show up to the office at 8 o'clock in the morning. If you're 5 minutes late, I'm looking at you. Or, oh, you should be the last person to leave the office. If not, it means you're not committed. That's just bullshit. The number of jobs that I've just like sat down with nothing to do, it's just crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Or I go ask for more projects and I get something that I don't want to do, no conversation. And so that's the approach that we're taking, is keeping it simple. I don't think any of this needs to be over engineered. It does not have to be as complex. No one will know how you best work other than you at the end of the day, right? I can't guess what the best work setup, best work environment for you is. Only you know it. And so the best thing that I can do is trust you to figure out what works best for you. Because if I don't have that trust, then maybe I shouldn't work with you in the first place. Why hire people that you don't trust? Why would you want to hire somebody and then mandate how they need to work because you don't trust when they tell you that another work style is actually going to be better for them? Then don't even hire them. Why do you have that much of a distrust? Give it a go. If things don't go well, that's fine. At that point, you can come in and say, "Hey, things don't work well." You can have a conversation, but don't start with that. Right? Start with trust. Let people figure out what works best for them, and see how it goes. What do you lose?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, like you said, sometimes people, this is an ADHD thing, you know, to be able to focus 30 minutes and after you need a break or do something else, because sometimes it causes you a lot of stress because, you know, sometimes finishing a project can cause you stress. So if you have multiple projects with different deadline, is quite easier for us to be able to just finish a project, because that's the problem with ADHD. We have a lot of difficulty to finish something when we started, and I find that it's the easiest way to succeed those tasks is to have other things to do at the same time, and not feeling ashamed that I want to do something else because I feel it's more pleasant, and the dopamines go up, and these projects simply finish easier, and you don't have that stress at the last minute. You need to offer that tomorrow at 1 p.m., and
Yeah.
you haven't done anything.
Yep. Yep. No, makes sense. And I mean, listen, the reality is a lot of employers often want folks to work on multiple projects. And that just seems to be the expectation these days anyways, right? No one wants to
Hmm.
do just one task. They want you to do more. And like I said, sometimes it is nice to kind of task switch because you get bored doing the same thing. And again, these are all conversations that employers should be open to having and seeing. Test it out, right? Don't start with a no, right? Test it out. How do you know that it's not going to work out until you test it and try it? And there's no reason to not do it. Another surprising and also horrifying fact, statistic that I came across recently was that 80% of folks who identify as neurodiverse in America are either underemployed or unemployed.
I
As in,
know.
they don't even have a seat at the table to have these conversations, let alone, they start a job and it's not an inclusive workplace. They're not even at the table. They don't even have a job. And it's so taxing and it's so unnecessary. And this is stemming from a lot of misinformation, a lot of old school thinking. And the more we have folks like yourself who are putting themselves out there and engaging in dialogue with employers and having open and honest conversations about, hey, when we ask for an accommodation, we don't mean make a donation and lose money as a business. All I'm saying is you work this way because you have two legs. I work this way because I have something else instead of feet. At the end of the day, we can both go from point A to point B. I just need to do it a different way, right? And give it a shot. And so I'm optimistic about the future. I am. I don't know how long it'll take for everyone to embrace this idea and get better. I do feel like we're on the right track with at least having these discussions and learning more. And listen, I don't know all the answers, right? I learn from
Hmm.
conversations like this. I mean, I'm learning right now about you enjoying working on multiple projects instead of working on one project with a firm deadline. It almost seems like you'll get more done if you have multiple things to work on, and you'll get less done if you have one
Hmm.
thing to work on. And so I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it almost what I'm hearing is one of the accommodations that you may ask for is, hey, employer, don't give me one project. If you're able to, give me 5 projects. Am I hearing that
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, you do.
I mean, that sounds like a blessing to an employer. If I have to wear my ROI hat, right? It doesn't sound like it's an accommodation. You're literally saying, give me more than.
Exactly. But the problem, like I said, is also not only about the side of the employer, is also the side of the employee that feel ashamed to be neurodivergent. They feel ashamed to be themselves, and I feel that guilt and that shame for a long time when I was younger. Since recently, I was so ashamed that I cannot do like everybody else, and I feel like a bad person or a bad employee because I was always fired because they didn't give me my accommodation, or they expect me to be able to do the job they asked me to do in like 24 in one day. In one day they asked me to be able to do everything, and that's not how the brain works, because I feel overwhelmed when I am in a new environment. I feel overwhelmed because people greet me and meet me all day. I meet new people and I'm like, I trying in my mind to remember their name, and it's so hard for me to remember name and faces, and so I get fired all the time, and I feel like I'm not no good because of that. I feel like I'm a failure, and I'm never going to find a job that corresponds me. And that's what employer doesn't know about as well, and you feel ashamed to tell them that reality of yours.
I mean, it's so disheartening, and it makes me, and it should make others so sad to hear that this has been the reality for you, right?
It
Because
is.
you have an intent to work. if anything, you're doing more than most people, because not only are you having to deal with a crappy deck of cards that have been dealt to you, you're also somehow, and I don't know how you're doing this, finding the energy and putting in the effort to be a voice for those that are similarly situated, right? You're doing more than
Mhm.
most people would do. A lot of folks just worry about themselves. Somehow you're managing to deal with all the stuff that you have to deal with, and on top, running these podcasts and running events, and so I think the saddest part is that you're extremely capable, and far from a failure. And it takes so much courage and a fighting spirit to wake up every day and say, "Hey, I'm going to tackle this. I'm going to deal with this. I'm going to be somehow be a catalyst of change." And I have a lot of respect and admiration for you. I'm sorry that this has been the reality for you. It should not be the case, especially if you had a few employers that were a little bit more open to at least having a conversation, as opposed to making decisions without speaking, and being simply unwilling to learn, and being unwilling to be open to a different way of thinking or a different way of being. And I'm hopeful, and I want things to change. I know they will. I also know it's going to take longer than anybody would want to, but conversations are a place to start. And the more folks hear about this, I hope the more this becomes normalized.
Yeah, like I said, I do try my best. And the reason why I decided to start that podcast because I was unemployed and I had nothing else to do, and I was like, I had two choice: cry in my bed all day and just let myself die, or do something about it and talk about neurodiversity and just find some ways to make a little bit of money, and even if it doesn't really work, but at least people are listening to me now, and most people will watch this in replay because that's sometimes the time is not fitting for everybody, and that's why I decided to create it this way as well. I decided to create my t-shirt, so in the down you will be able to see the link of the t-shirt. If you listen in on Spotify, you will have all those links on the bio as well. If you want to go on my college fund, this is still there as well. It will stay open until I finish school. So this is our ways that you can support me, and also you can hire me as a website designer. Okay, I have more than 10 years experience and I cannot find a job. That's a problem.
Well, I mean, listen, hey, I can tell you this much: you know how to run a podcast. This has been very smooth. Had no issues, and you set this up really well. Let me ask you a question, and this is
Sure.
more so that others, and some of it is from my own learning, and I'm sure others will learn from it as well. What would you recommend employers do in two instances? One, when they are interviewing folks that are neurodiverse, um, how should they go about it? How would you recommend employers go about the interview process? One, and second, when it comes to conversations around accommodations, what is it that an employer can do to create as safe as a space as possible to have conversations? Forget about actually implementing any of these accommodation requests, but at least to have conversations. What would you, in a better world, in a perfect world, what advice, guidance do you have for employers for these two instances?
To accept the diagnosis of your employee and not find it and not put it like it is a problem. Put it like a quality, like a gift and a talent, because neurodivergent people have a lot of superpower that will make your business bigger. They can do anything faster than anyone. Okay, we are faster. When we are hyper focused, we finish everything faster, and it's normal for us to just feeling bored afterwards and want to go home because there's nothing else to do, and to accept that this person wants to work with tasks that are important for you to be done and not by hours, because the hours doesn't matter. It's really what you need to do in that position, like you said earlier. And also to not be too fast, fast, fast. Everything needs to be fast. You need to learn this now. You need to learn everything as fast as possible, and not and accept that the first week the employee is not going to do anything. Is going to learn the environment, learn the roles that you have in that business. And it's okay that at the end of the week you don't see anything done, because don't worry, next week is going to be way faster because we had time to process all the new information and all that needs to be done. Because don't forget that we get overwhelmed easier, and it's normal when we have names to remember as well. It's not only the task, we need to remember the name of the person that we work with. We need to remember where our desk is. And this is a little detail that we can have our time to figure it out, because we are people with routine. If we don't have any routine, everything collapses. We are not able to do anything. If I don't have my routine in the morning, I can guarantee you that I'm not going to do anything with my days. And it's the same thing. I'm coming in a new environment with a new routine, and I have to adapt it and change my routine. And when this is more appropriate with autistic person, even with ADHD we need routine, but with autistic people it's even more noticeable that they need to be at a certain time, at a certain desk, in a certain environment. And this can be harder at the beginning, and you have to understand that it's okay that it takes time, and just not abandon and say that employee is not good because it's not fast enough that week. And that's the problem, they're not patient. Employer, please be patient with us. We will do amazing job, but you need to be patient and accept that the first week, like I said, it's not going to bring you anywhere.
No, this is very helpful context, and I think hearing this from you directly, but also underpinning all of this is again this intent to wanting to do well, this intent to
Mm-hmm.
perform, right? It's not none of what you've said seems like, hey, listen, I don't want to do the task. All I hear is I'll probably do it better than
Mm-hmm.
most people that you're used to. All you're asking for is a little bit of flexibility, right? You're not even
Mm-hmm.
asking for extra. So if it's a 2 week deadline, don't expect steady work to be done every day for 2 weeks. Maybe there's a week where a little less gets done, but
Mm-hmm.
week two, there'll be a lot more output. Well, why do you care as long as things get done in 2 weeks? And again, I'm hearing a cry for patience, flexibility, and just a general willingness to listen, which
Yeah.
as an employer, it's something that we should do and we should do more of. And I really appreciate you sharing that.
And it's not only that, when you put us too much stress, we're going to fail, we're going to do more mistakes, and those mistakes can, if they're count down, they can be a problem for your business. That's totally normal. If I do too much mistake, you won't fire me. That's normal. But if you stress me out, I'm going to do even more business mistakes. I'm not going to be able to focus on the job, because I'm going to have surrounding, you have to do this, you have to do this. And sometimes employers going past you and they're checking your computer, and that gives you a lot of anxiety. I have a lot of anxiety in my life, and this makes me fail more than succeed, to have somebody always on my back telling me everything what to do. And that sometimes is very stressful.
No, for sure, for sure. I mean, this stressing someone that who's already stressed is generally, whether you're neurodiverse or not the most effective strategy for motivating your already stressed employees and say, oh yeah, let's do this, let's make things even worse, and then maybe they'll just be less stressed. Does not make any sense. And so and I know that I know that you have a very pleasant attitude about this and you laugh about this, but I can only imagine how annoying and difficult and burdensome it can be, if this is what you have to face every day. I've always been a big believer, that nobody wants to wake up. Nobody um, wants to wake up, show up at work, and do a bad job. Like
Hmm.
I just find it really hard to believe that that should be a concern that an employer has. I think folks generally want to wake up and do a good job. The reason they're doing a bad job is because something is wrong somewhere. Either they're not given the right tools, either they're in the wrong seat, or they are not given, the right work environment to produce, or timing is off, something's off. Just the idea that there are people that wake up and say, hey, that's my goal today, is to wake up and do as shitty as a job as possible. Who wants that? Nobody wants that, right? And so I think this is similar. I'm hearing similar things, and so yeah, absolutely. Just listening to you and your perspective. Now, I hope, to some extent, has been helpful to me, and I'm hopeful that others who are looking to be a little bit more open and inclusive in their hiring practices also get a similar message.
Mental health is important, okay, employers? Very important, because if your employee doesn't feel good in your job, they're going to break down, and it's going to cost you more money because they're going to be in health, they're not going to be able to work. So please take care of the mental health of all your employees, and give them a good environment where they feel that you trust them, because we want you to trust us at the same time. And yes, you're here to give us feedbacks. If something is wrong, don't wait to fire us to tell us that is wrong. Tell us before, so we can make some change to make sure that the job is as good as you want it to be, because sometimes that happens too. They fire you before they tell you what's going wrong.
Yeah, yeah. Again, why do that, right? I think the cost of rehiring and
Yeah,
retraining someone is oftentimes very, very expensive and inefficient, and oftentimes it makes a lot of sense to just have a conversation.
yeah.
And again, yeah, not be afraid of someone that doesn't think like you do. Not Don't be afraid of folks that function differently. Different doesn't mean bad. Different doesn't mean scary. Different just
Mhm.
means different. And no two people are alike, any way you look at it, right? And so this is, yeah, definitely very helpful. Anything else, that Melly, that you think we can just do to be more helpful in general?
For us, for me in general, it will be to accept that we are different and we can still do the job even with our differences, because that's the problem at first. It's I said that if ADHD says, like, if I have a plague and you don't want to hire me just because I've said that word, neurodiversity, and they're like, oh my goodness, we're going to die if we hire that person. Oh, and I'm saying that very dramatic, of course. But they thinking that in their mind. They're so scared of that word neurodiversity or disability or any other words. They're like, oh no, I'm not hiring that. That's going to be a problem for me. And that's not the truth. It's not true. It's not a problem. And trust me, you're going to be so surprised if you give a chance to somebody. I have 10 years of experience in website design, and I struggle. Can you imagine that? It's not normal, And I had to be as a freelancer because nobody wanted to hire me, so I had to make myself there, and it was even harder. And I had depression, anxiety, because I see my bank account so empty, and I didn't know what to do. Even now in 2022, I feel the same thing. Even if I have a podcast event, if I have an event, I struggle every day, and that's not normal. Like you said, 80% of neurodivergent have bad employer, or simply don't have a job, or have a small job that doesn't pay enough for them to live. That's a problem, and that needs to change now.
It should have changed, a few many years ago,
Yeah, I
but now seems as good as a time as any, to make some progress. But yeah, really appreciate all the work that you've been doing.
And I'm going to say something to the teachers as well, because when I was at school, in high school, they always put me in like bad jobs that I didn't want to do, that was not my purpose in life. And they say you only can do this because of your neurodiversity, because you have difficulty to learn. You cannot go to college. You have neurodiversity. You're not able to do that. So they like stop you right away to your dream. They tell you, no, not possible. You're not good in school. No, no, no. You're going to stay and do some jobs like concierge and stuff like that. They were telling me to go like cleaning in the hospital. They tell me that this was the only thing that I could do with my life, and everybody knows that the sight of blood is not working with me, you know. But they wanted me to do that kind of job. They tell me that I wasn't going to have a future because of that, and I believed that for a long time because everybody told me that. And I think that the problem starts at school when you're a child. They tell you all the time you're not good, you're not capable, you're not able to do this, you're not going to be able to have a business, you're not going to be able to work that field, etc., etc., because they always put education first. And yes, education is important when you want to go to education, but if you don't want, if you're not good in school, doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to have a good job and a good salary. And that's the problem, because they show you at a young age that ADHD is going to be a barrier in everything in your life.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I mean, it seems like the issue is just pervasive, right? It doesn't just start and stop with the employers. It almost sounds like there's some fundamental challenges with the educational system also.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you create the right learning environment, and how do you not um, throw roadblocks to people wanting to learn even before they have an opportunity to learn, right? I mean, the notion that you can't do X, Y, or Z because you identify as X, Y, or Z is just wrong,
Mm-hmm.
right? No one should tell you or anyone what you can and cannot do. That decision is yours and yours alone to make,
Mm-hmm.
um, and shouldn't be mandated. And so it seems like a whole another topic for another day. And
Yeah.
later. Again, same thing. Create the right space. Don't make decisions on behalf of other people,
Mm-hmm.
especially when I guess they're telling you that they want to do something. Let them do it.
Yeah, exactly. And just support them, because that's a problem when you're neurodivergent. Even your family does not support you as they should, and that can put everybody in poverty and low self-esteem, etc., etc. And it's even harder to find job when you don't believe you can fit that job, you know, or you're not applying because you think you cannot be hired, you know. And that's a little bit that too, and you feel they're not going to be inclusive enough. So my last question will be for you to just tell me, it's not really a question, like I do to every of my guests, is I'm giving you the last word. I'm going to give you, if you have something else that you want to say about inclusivity in the workplace that you haven't talked about, and you want to, or you want to tell everybody else, you can do it right away now.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is a position that uh, I've taken. It's changed over time. Is that the burden should be on employers
Mm-hmm.
to learn about um, things that they can do to be as inclusive as possible. And yet, when it comes to topics such as neurodiversity, the amount of information that's out there in a way that is real is tricky. And oftentimes, as an employer, I'm having to rely on conversations like this. I'm having to rely on folks that are neurodiverse to tell me what I should be doing. And it's a bit of an unfair ask because, on the one hand, folks that are neurodiverse, to some extent, including you, you're the one that's had to deal with a lot of difficulty, a lot of discrimination. And then the very same employers are also asking you to teach us on how to be better, right? And it is an unfair ask, because it does put quite a bit of burden on you. And at the same time, I also feel like that's the best way and the only way that I can learn. And so my ask is continue having these conversations, and I certainly appreciate you being willing and open to have them, even though it's difficult and even though it's a huge burden on you. I just generally appreciate that you're willing to have these conversations, and the more we talk about this openly, the better the world will become. So, it's my only request is keep doing what you're doing, and I will personally be as supportive as I can, in any way possible. If anyone's hiring for a website development services, or even social media. Looks like Melly is a great hire, and just give her space to do as well as she wants to. So that's my only ask.
Thanks so much. So again, I'm going to tell everybody to participate to the Neurodiversity Awareness event that is September 12th. Go to neurodiversityevent.com to get your ticket now, because they are going to go up. Now, if you want to have a live stream plus replay, it's going to be $5 only, but it's going to be 15 in August 29th. So if you want your ticket at a cheap price, you need to get it right now, or you're going to miss that opportunity. So yeah, thank you again so much for being here today, everybody. Thanks, Manoj, to be there too. I'm so excited that you accept my request to talk about inclusivity today, and we'll see you everybody soon, and see you next week, everybody. Bye.